As I've been reading several articles about emotional healing, I found this one illustration about dogs. How many of you have dogs? Okay, a bunch of you have dogs. Any of you ever told your kids to feed the dogs and they didn't do it? Yeah? And then, let me ask you a question. If you don't feed your dogs, do they just act like nothing's wrong, lay around? No, right? They're like in your face, right? I mean, they're like, hey, something's wrong here. I'm hungry, and you're not feeding me. In fact, our dogs get ahead of the schedule, you know, and they want to be fed at like 5:30 or 5 or 5:30, and we're not feeding them until 6. And so if you would let them, they would pressure you. I mean, they kind of, you know, dogs can train humans. They can. I mean, they can train us to respond exactly how they want. It's kind of like nagging kids or whatever, you know, they finally just get their way. And so I wanted to share this video with you. These are our two dogs, Dakota and Carolina. Carolina is a black dog. She's a lab mix. And then Dakota is like a mixed breed dog. We got her. Both of them, one of them, the black one at the pound, the other one from a farm when we first moved here. Dakota is the oldest dog, and this is how they beg when they want something, okay? It didn't last very long. So she's kind of wiry and hyper. Here's what Dakota does. She never barks. She just stares at you. And if you're not paying attention, then she takes it a step further, and she'll kind of. Hey now. Once in a while, she'll do this. Do you see those? Did you see her lips move? She doesn't bark. She speaks to you. You know? Hey, she just gets your attention. She doesn't really make much noise, but her lips move and sound comes out. Doesn't sound like a dog. It's a little creepy, but she gets your attention. And so, you know, this author of this article that I read said this. She asked this question. If you have two dogs and you feed one and you don't feed the other one, what's going to happen to the one you don't feed?
One of them's going to be jealous.
Jealous? That's the first stage, right? What's going to happen in 2 weeks? One of them's going to die, right? The one that you don't feed will eventually die. And so the article kind of gave us this idea of comparing emotional wounds to feeding a dog. In other words, she said that there's two dogs in our life. There's the dog number one, the dog of pain and hate and anger and bitterness, and that we can feed that dog all day long. Or we can feed the dog of the good stuff in our lives, the things that God is doing still. And so I want to talk about feeding the dog. The dogs in our life, not our physical dogs, but the spiritual things that are going on in our lives. Because here's the thing, you know, events that cause emotional wounds can become the central focus of our lives. Anybody know somebody that you could say right now, without even talking to them, you could quote what they're going to say? That if you had a conversation with that aunt or that uncle or that grandparent or that friend, that they're going to immediately go cycle the conversation back around to the misery in their life or the negative things that happen to them. And so it's very clear that they've kind of been swallowed up. In fact, I would say this, emotional wounds beg to be fed. Emotional wounds beg to be fed. They want your attention. So we can get constantly obsessed with thinking about those things that happen to you. We can bring it up and make it always the topic of discussion or thought. We can be filled with hate and anger toward the people that, you know, did these things to us. Or we can be filled with anger toward God because, you know, it happened and He didn't stop it from happening. And so I guess the same question is true of the dogs is true for us in our lives. If you only feed the negative, evil stuff the emotional pain, if you only feed the emotional pain in your life at the neglect of all the positive stuff, what's going to happen to the positive stuff? It's going to die, isn't it? All those things that could feed into your life, that could bring encouragement and strength, those things are going to die as you continue to feed the negative stuff. I've heard this example told many times, and maybe you've heard it too, that often when a child dies, that a marriage falls apart. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
That when a child dies unexpectedly, that a marriage falls apart. And often that's because one or both of the adults in the situation have gotten so focused on the loss and the negativity and the pain of that they've allowed their marriage to starve to death and die. And the good things that they did have go away. There's a few scriptures I want to share with you today, and there's some key words in here that I have not underlined because I'm going to kind of give you a little quiz on each of these, see if we're kind of thinking the same way. So, Proverbs chapter 10, verse 12 says this, one sentence. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. This is an easy one. What's the key word? What is it? Love. Yeah. Because here's the thing. I don't think that the writer of Proverbs is saying, hey, look, tough luck, you went through a bad time, you just need to love everybody. I don't think that's what he's saying. I mean, I do think that God calls us to love, but I also know that there's a real process that has to take place in order for us to love and forgive. But what happens is the negative stuff can actually wipe out the love that is on the good side of things, with our family or with our friends or with our church or with God, because we're angry about what's happened. In other words, he's saying that love, as we allow that to grow, we feed the love, then the negative stuff has less power over us and begins to die. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 22 says this. Do not say, I will repay evil. Wait for the Lord, and he will deliver you. There's a key word there. It's a tough one. What is it? Wait. It's hard to wait, isn't it? I always said that if somebody messed with my kids, people can do stuff to me, but if somebody messed with my kids, I'd have a pretty tough time with that. If somebody hurt or abused, sexually abused, or murdered one of my children, and I knew where they lived, I'm just saying, guys, you might have to find another pastor. I don't know. I don't know if I could do it. I would pray that God would give me the strength to not do what was in my head to do. But it'd be tough. See, one of the things that the writer of Proverbs reminds us of is that God's justice is always way worse than anything we could ever do to someone. That as soon as I step in between God and his justice for those that have done wrong, I interrupt that process and I take that into my own hands and I kind of take care of it the way I was going to take care of it. I eat the consequences of that. My family eats the consequences of that. Maybe I spend the rest of my life in prison or lose my marriage or whatever. But if I step back and I say, you know what? The worst thing I can do to my enemy is leave them for the wrath of God if they don't change and if something doesn't happen there. That's the worst thing that we can do against them, is to just say, you know what? You'll get yours when God brings his judgment. And I pray that you change. And so he says, wait on the Lord. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 14 and 15 says this, strive for peace with, and who's he say strive for peace with? Everyone, right? Say everyone with me. Everyone. He doesn't say just with the people that we like or the people that we, have to live with anyway, all right? He's saying be at peace or strive for peace with everyone and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, and I love this, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. Key phrase there for me is the root of bitterness. Root of bitterness. You guys ever had something in your mouth that tasted bitter? I mean, what's the face that you make when something tastes bitter, right? it's like, oh, that's awful. And the same thing happens in your spirit when you get filled with bitterness. You guys ever known somebody that was full of negativity and misery? I mean, it's all over their face, right? They're just ready to lash out. They're wounded. They're bitter. I read an article this week that talked about how bitterness can actually affect our physical health. Did you know that? That you can be so negative about all the things that have gone on in your life, or the regrets that you have, or the negative focus that you have, that it can actually physically affect your health. There's a hormone called cortisol. I didn't know this till this week. There's a hormone called cortisol that actually gets elevated in our bodies as we stress and fret and hold bitterness and anger and hate in our hearts. And it can cause our immune system to be insufficient. We'll get sick more often. Molly's. Not necessarily. It doesn't necessarily mean. You know, everybody's like, poor Molly, she's so wounded. So I've been sick too. Doesn't necessarily mean that, but it can. It can affect you in many different ways. That was awesome. And so, here's the thing. Satan wants you to feed the evil dog. Satan wants you to stay consumed with the negative things of your life, and as long as you do that, he's happy because he knows that his stuff's living and growing in you, and God's stuff's dying inside of you. Well, let's talk about dog number 2 for a second. Let's say that you're a victim. You've been abused, neglected, betrayed. You've lost a child to, a lot of people have lost children to drunk drivers. There's all kinds of horrific ways that bad things happen to folks. But let me ask you the question. If you were in those shoes, what could you say is still good in your life? What are some things that are good in your life? What are some things?
Wake up every morning.
You wake up every morning. So you're alive.
Huh?
You're alive. You're breathing.
You know that God loves you.
You know that God loves you.
Not in jail.
Not in jail. That's always a positive, right? Yeah? Yeah, absolutely. And for some of my friends who have been in prison, let me tell you something. That's not something I think of every day when I wake up, but I guarantee you it's something that my friends think of every day when they wake up because they don't ever want to go back there, They feel blessed that they made it through that season of their life, and now their life's back on track. Absolutely. What else is good in your life? Family and friends. Yeah. Your health. Absolutely. I mean, we could probably make a pretty long list, couldn't we, of the positive things that are in our life. But what happens is it's so overwhelming when we hit things that are negative. It's so easy for us to allow our minds and our hearts to just become consumed with those things. Has any of you ever said, I might as well die? And sometimes it's over stupid stuff, right? 2 or 3 negative things happened in one day. Your car didn't start. You went to work, your boss yelled at you. You come home, you had a fight with your spouse, and you went to bed and said, I wish I could just die. And it's like, really? It takes 3 things to wipe us out? 3 things? Sometimes less than that. And it's like there are folks that have endured horrific, awful things, and they were still able to think of the positive that was going on in their life and what God had provided for them along the way. There's a video commercial that Dove body wash made that I absolutely love. And it gives us the real understanding of how negatively we look at ourselves and how everyone else sees us differently, and God sees us differently than we see ourselves, because sometimes we get sucked into the negative. So let's watch this Dove.
I'm a forensic artist. Worked for the San Jose Police Department from 1995 to 2011.
I showed up to a place I'd never been, and there was a guy with a drafting board.
We couldn't see them, they couldn't see us.
Tell me about your hair.
I didn't know what he was doing, but then I could tell after several questions that he was drawing me.
Tell me about your chin.
It kind of protrudes a little bit, especially when I smile.
Your jaw.
My mom told me I had a big jaw.
What would be your most prominent feature?
Kind of have a fat, rounder face.
The older I've gotten, the more freckles I've gotten.
I would say I have a pretty big forehead.
Once I get a sketch, I say thank you very much, and then they leave. I don't see them.
All I had been told before the sketch was to get friendly with this other woman, Chloe.
Today I'm going to ask you some questions about a person you met earlier, and I'm going to ask you some general questions about their face.
She was thin, so you could see her cheekbones. And her chin, it was a nice, thin chin.
She had nice eyes. They lit up when she spoke.
Cute nose.
She had blue eyes, very nice blue eyes.
So here we are. This is the sketch that you helped me create, and that's a sketch that somebody described of you.
So yeah, that's...
She looks closed off and fatter, sadder too. The second one looks more open, friendly, and happy.
I should be more grateful of my natural beauty. It impacts the choices and the friends that we make, the jobs we apply for, how we treat our children. It impacts everything. It couldn't be more critical to your happiness.
Do you think you're more beautiful than you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
We spend a lot of time as women analyzing and trying to fix the things that aren't quite right. And we should spend more time appreciating the things that we do like.
He asked a question. Do you think you're more beautiful than you realize, than you think you are? She said, yeah. See, God sees us so much differently than we see ourselves. And the emotional wounds that we have inside of us, they cause a self-perception that is twisted. They cause a self-perception that is negative and self-demeaning. That's not who you are. And Satan would love for you to believe that lie and think little of yourself. But God created you. And He loves you. And He wants you to see yourself as He sees you. One of the questions that I think is so important to ask when we've been wounded and we're carrying around these emotional wounds is, who here on this earth still deserves the best part of you? Who still on this earth deserves the best part of you? Because we can allow those emotional wounds to destroy us, and we become useless to God, to the people, to the family that we have, or to those around us, because we're so absorbed into this pain. And you know, the truth is, being a victim is not your fault. But remaining a victim is a choice you have to make. Being a victim is not your fault. But remaining a victim is a choice we all have to make. Again, I want to say this, and I want you to see it on the screen. That our lives, the dangers that our lives would begin to revolve around the pain that we carry around. There's a few scriptures on this that I want to share, and I'm going to ask the worship team to come on up as we get ready to close today. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 18 starts out like this. The writer of Isaiah says, "Forget the former things." Forget the former things. Can you say that with me? Forget the former things. He says, leave that stuff. He says, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. He says, forget the former things and don't dwell on the past. See, no matter what Satan has done to you, no matter what damage, no matter what wounds you have taken on, God never stops making a way in the wilderness. He never stops putting new water into that dry land to bring out new life and healing. But we have to receive it. We have to accept that from Him. Another passage is Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, where the Apostle Paul, he reminds us of where our mind should continually be. He says, finally, brothers and sisters, he says, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, he says, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, he says, think about such things. What would happen if all you did was focus on the good things? And every time you were challenged and you were starting to think about the negative and starting to have a pity party or starting to think about the awful things that happened in your life, what if every time you started to think about those things, you saw that as an attack of Satan and you just said, you know what, and here's the good things, and you start naming them out. Man, I've got great friends that love me. I've got a church where I, belong. I've got a family that cares about me. I've got my health. I'm not in prison. I woke up today, all those things we talked about. That we would start naming those things in Satan's face as a way of saying, not going to live in the negative, not going to feed the negative dog and the evil. I'm going to feed the positive. Let's stand. When Jesus was with his disciples, here's what he said to them. He said, as the Father has loved me, so I love you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. And then he says this in verse 11. He says, I have told you this so that, that's an important two words, so that. He says, I've told you all this about my love and remaining in the Father, so that my joy may be in you. Get that? He doesn't say the source of your joy is from you having a good day. Thank the Lord, because it's not always a good day, right? He says the source of your joy, he wants it to come from him. In other words, he says, word for word, my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. Some of you have been through some stuff that you've said to yourself, I don't know if I'll ever be able to have a bright day again. My life's been full of darkness. This morning, if that's you, if you've been through some stuff and you're just fighting to stay positive, and you realizing today, I've been feeding the evil dog for so long that the good things in my life have started to die, and I need to change that. There's people left here I need to pour love into. Then maybe this morning, God's calling you to spend just a few minutes praying about that. And so I'm going to invite you as we finish out this service today to just, if you want to come, if you feel like the Lord's calling you to come up and begin to pray. That God will give you the strength to fight the evil and focus on the good. Let's pray. Come on, man.